The moment my boss asked me to rub sunscreen on her back, I thought I had finally crossed a line I could never uncross. She stood beneath the blazing afternoon sun, holding out the bottle with a faint smile, while I struggled to understand why she had chosen me for such a personal favor. Then she looked over her shoulder, smiled softly, and whispered, "That's not where I meant." For a second, the entire beach seemed to disappear. The waves rolled somewhere in the distance, children laughed near the shore, and music floated from the hotel terrace, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I had worked for Elena Hart for almost 3 years. She was my boss, the most respected woman in our company, and someone I had always admired from a safe distance. She was confident, elegant, intelligent, and seemingly impossible to reach. I was just Daniel, a quiet assistant who had spent most of his adult life trying to survive rather than dream. I never imagined that one strange afternoon would change the way I saw her, or the way she saw me. Before we continue, if stories about kindness, second chances, and unexpected connections touch your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more stories about second chances. That morning, Elena had brought several members of our small team to a coastal resort for what was supposed to be a relaxing company retreat. She had recently saved our department from being shut down after a disastrous financial quarter, and everyone was celebrating. Everyone except me. I had received a phone call 2 days earlier telling me that my younger brother had lost his job, my mother's medical bills were increasing, and the small apartment I rented might soon become impossible to afford. I smiled around my coworkers, pretending everything was fine, because I had learned long ago that struggling people were expected to struggle quietly. Elena noticed anyway. She always did. She noticed when I skipped lunch. She noticed when I worked late. She noticed when I secretly sent money to my family during the middle of the month. I had assumed she simply had a sharp eye for employees. I never considered that she might actually care. That afternoon, most of the team went swimming. I stayed behind to answer emails under a shaded umbrella. Elena eventually walked toward me carrying 2 cold bottles of water. She handed one to me and told me I worked too much. I laughed and said that someone had to keep the company running while everyone else enjoyed themselves. She shook her head, and for the first time I saw exhaustion behind her perfect smile. She told me that people often assumed she had everything because she was successful. They saw the expensive clothes, the corner office, the company car, and the confidence. They never saw the nights she spent alone in her apartment wondering whether every decision she made was destroying something she loved. I wanted to tell her that I understood loneliness better than anyone. Instead, I simply said that sometimes people were good at hiding their pain. She looked at me for a long moment and quietly agreed. A few minutes later, she asked me to help with the sunscreen. Her shoulders were already turning pink from the sun, and she couldn't reach the middle of her back properly. I hesitated, but she handed me the bottle anyway. I carefully squeezed some lotion into my palm and started spreading it across the exposed part of her back, trying to remain professional despite how awkward the situation felt. Then she smiled over her shoulder and said those words. "That's not where I meant." My hand stopped. She pointed toward a small patch of skin near her shoulder that she had missed earlier. Then she laughed softly at my expression and told me I looked as though I had just been asked to solve a billion-dollar business problem. We both laughed. The tension disappeared. But something else remained. From that moment, we began talking differently. Not as boss and employee, but as 2 people who had accidentally discovered that the other was carrying invisible wounds. Over the next few weeks, our conversations became longer. Elena learned about my family, my brother's struggles, and the reason I had abandoned my dream of becoming a teacher. I learned that she had once been engaged to a man who cared more about her money than her heart. He had left after discovering that her father intended to give her control of the company. Since then, Elena had built walls around herself so high that even she sometimes forgot how to climb over them. One evening, I found her sitting alone in the office after everyone had gone home. The city lights reflected against the glass windows, and she looked completely defeated. She had just learned that one of our biggest investors wanted to remove her from leadership. She told me she was tired. Not physically tired. Tired of always having to be strong. I sat across from her and reminded her that being strong didn't mean never falling apart. Sometimes it simply meant finding the courage to stand up again. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked why I always knew what to say. I told her the truth. Because nobody had ever said those things to me when I needed to hear them. That sentence changed something between us. The following weeks were difficult. Rumors started spreading around the office. People noticed how often Elena asked for my opinion. Some assumed I was trying to gain a promotion. Others whispered that there was something romantic between us. Elena could have protected herself by distancing me. Instead, she called me into her office and offered me a promotion. I refused. She looked surprised. I told her I didn't want anyone thinking I had earned success because of our friendship. I wanted to earn it because I was capable. For the first time, Elena smiled with genuine pride. She told me that was exactly why she trusted me. The investor meeting came a week later. Elena walked into the conference room prepared to fight for everything she had built. I had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing the financial presentation that could determine the future of the company. When the meeting began, I sat behind her, terrified that one mistake would destroy everything. But Elena never looked back. She believed in me. And somehow, that belief gave me the courage to believe in myself. The presentation succeeded. The investors changed their position. Elena kept her company. And I finally understood something I had spent years forgetting. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't the person who gives you money, a job, or an easy life. Sometimes they are simply the person who looks at you when you're struggling and says, without words, I see you. Months passed. Our relationship remained careful and complicated because she was still my boss, and neither of us wanted something beautiful to become something dishonest. Eventually, I accepted a leadership position in another division, completely separate from Elena. Only then did she finally ask me to dinner. There was no office. No employees. No expectations. Just 2 people sitting across from each other beneath warm restaurant lights. She admitted that the sunscreen incident had stayed in her mind because she had never expected me to treat her with such respect. She had been used to people wanting something from her, money, influence, attention, opportunities. I had simply been kind. I told her that she had taught me something too. She had taught me that being vulnerable didn't make a person weak. Sometimes, it was the bravest thing they could do. A year later, we returned to the same coastal resort where everything had started. We walked along the beach as the sun disappeared beneath the horizon. Elena looked at me and laughed about the sunscreen incident, saying she still couldn't believe how nervous I had been. I told her that I couldn't believe how much my life had changed since that afternoon. She took my hand. And for once, neither of us was afraid of what came next. Because our story had never really been about sunscreen. It had been about 2 lonely people discovering that kindness could open doors that fear had kept locked for years. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be quietly struggling, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. You never know when a simple act of kindness might become the beginning of someone's second chance. And before you leave, comment, I believe in second chances, if you believe that sometimes the people who seem strongest are the ones who need kindness the most. Because you never truly know what someone is carrying behind their smile. And sometimes, one small moment of kindness is enough to remind someone that they don't have to carry it alone.